Hello, dear traders. Happy new week to you. What a great previous week we've had with some good volatility and decent profit across board. Welcome to this new week, the 28th of April to the 2nd of May 2025. As always, I'm Atomashi Dani, your global market analyst. So we're starting with our fundamental analysis and the pairs we're looking at this week. Some pairs include the NZD USD, the AUD USD, the USD JPY, the Euro AUD as a consolation, and the GBP NZD. And of course, we also like to look at Bitcoin to see what movements we could predict here. So today we seem to have a somewhat technical day with perhaps maybe only the um, Canadian federal elections as the significant data or significant news expected today. So we have the Canadian federal elections today. You want to look out for the Canadian pairs tied to the Canadian dollar. Perhaps maybe this could also rub off on some pairs tied to the US dollar because of the current trade wars with the US. All right. If the new guy wins, we could see some shift away from the trade wars and perhaps leaning towards the US a bit. Okay. And this, in this case, might strengthen the US dollar. Perhaps a decrease of the tariffs. We're going to discuss this after he wins the election. So look out for this in perhaps a Facebook Live or the YouTube live. All right. Next, we're looking at the US job openings affecting pairs tied to the US dollar, especially the NZD USD, AUD USD, and USD JPY. You want to pay attention to that. We're looking at that and expecting it from the economic calendar on the 29th of April. That's on Tuesday, tomorrow. And Wednesday seems to be a very eventful week with significant data from major economies coming up back to back. So we have the Australian CPI data. This is quite important because it concerns the AUD USD, Euro, and the Euro AUD. All right. And considering the fact that the Australian Central Bank and the New Zealand Central Bank recently cut interest rates. So the CPI data is important to see what effect that has had on inflation in the economy. So we want to pay some good attention to this, especially if you're trading pairs tied to the Australian dollar. Next is the German prelim CPI. Of course, we know that if Germany sneezes, the rest of Europe gets sick. So you want to pay attention to this. Let's see what the CPI data says and how it affects pairs tied to the euro. This concerns the euro AUD. All right. The USD ADP non-farm employment change, jobs data, part of the US jobs data, quite key. And the US advanced GDP, all right, and employment cost index, a quarter-on-quarter data. Very important. It's going to affect pairs tied to the US dollar. Pay key attention to that. All right. This might also seem quite significant, especially since the cost index is a somewhat measure of how well or how effective the US interest rate cut has been by the US Federal Reserve Bank Chair Jerome Powell. And the advanced GDP could also signal how well let's say Trump has done in the first quarter in office. Okay, so you want to pay some good attention to that. Okay, it's a measure of how the economy has been. So it's a measure of Jerome Powell's performance and also a measure of Trump's performance in office. This is quite significant. Perhaps we might even get some interventions, uncalled for or sneaky interventions. So be very careful when trading this data. And of course, the almighty core PCE price index, a great measure of inflation data. Again, in order to measure the interest rate cuts in the US right now, you want to pay some attention to this. A decrease of this index is a good indication that the interest rate cut is having great impact in the US economy, even with the US interest rate, the US trade wars with other countries. Okay, and we might not get a decrease if we have perhaps something close to expected value. Okay, not too far from it. That's also a positive sign, especially considering the fact that the US has suffered some crazy tariff wars by the Trump administration. So pay attention to this. Next on this list is the Japan's BOJ policy rate. and the monetary policy statement on Thursday. For pairs tied to Japanese yen, this is very important, especially since the yen has been appreciating for weeks. Beautiful appreciations brought in some great profit for us from December last year up until now. Okay, the yen has been doing very great. It's been appreciating against other pairs. So you want to pay attention to these. Hawkish statements will boost the yen against other pairs, and dovish statements will perhaps weaken it against other pairs. So let's pay attention to Thursday on this one. And the US unemployment claims and ISM manufacturing PMI also on Thursday. That's going to be released. Then on Friday, what a great way to end the week on Friday with the NFP data, US jobs data uh, expected on Friday from the economic calendar. Of course, we know how impactful the NFP is, so pay attention to that. Okay, for pairs tied to the US dollar. And for Bitcoin, tariff war escalations or the trade deal could impact this guy. So whenever you have significant news concerning the trade wars or whether there's going to be a deal between the US and China and other countries, you want to look at how that's going to affect Bitcoin. Okay, a trade deal will boost the US dollar against Bitcoin. Okay, whereas if there's further escalations, or maybe the Chinese president Xi Jinping refuses to pick his call, okay, refuses to respond to Donald Trump, we may have Bitcoin going the way it's currently going, looking quite bullish. So let's pay some attention to this. Of course, we know it's crypto. Crypto has got a mind of its own, so fundamentals don't tend to affect it quite significantly. If it does, perhaps in the short term, very short term, it doesn't often exceed beyond the half of the day or the next 6 hours, or perhaps maybe the next 24 hours. So let's just look at this and see how we can take advantage of the opportunities here. All right, let's start for fundamental analysis. Now let's go to the technicals. What do we have on the chart? And we're going to be starting with the NZD USD. Now, what do we see on this guy? This is the NZD USD. Of course, first off, on the weekly chart, we can spot that price responded to a significant swing high there, 0.6280. Okay, touched that and seems to be heading for bearish levels. However, it went past key order block level and key psychological level 5900 in the past. So it's gone way above that and way above psychological level of 0.600. Okay. And it formed strong price rejection right there. Very great price rejection, as can be seen by the hammer with the long wick. Okay. Indicating that the bearish momentum is picking up. On the daily chart, we see price it broke away from its ascending channel we've been talking about and the 200-day moving average. That's the red line there. Okay. And when it touched the psychological level of 600 and key level of 6028, price also seemed to be reacting to that as it formed an evening star. It seems to be targeting lower levels based on analysis on the daily chart. Currently, it's above the ascending channel. Hence, typical trading logic will say sell, buy rather, because price may perhaps hit higher levels. But again, this week, last week, we had the possibilities of a trade deal with China. Okay, pay attention to this. The trade deal with China. If this happens, it's going to favor a boost on the bearish end for the NZD USD. So pay attention to that, to Trump's comments or comments from any of his key staff in his administration. On the 4-hour chart, we see the perfect Elliott wave pattern there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 AB, suggesting that we're probably going to have nice bearish drop. And we see price currently breaking below the ascending trend line right there, the pink line. And if you connect that pink line on the RSI, it shows that we're having some sort of negative divergence, indicating that very soon, perhaps there's going to be an imminent bearish drop in price. So that's negative divergence right there. Okay, pay attention to this. And then for key resistance and support levels, on the 1-hour chart in the short term, we see price move nicely along an ascending channel. It broke past that, had a successful retest, and it seems to be heading to lower levels. Of course, the break of the channel definitely signals a sell. We know that. But where to sell right now is what we're going to look at. So a break off key support level 0.5941 could see price touch um, 0.5920. Okay, if it goes below that, we'll touch psychological level of 5900. If it goes below that, 5881, below that, 5864, and below that, 5835. Of course, because of nicely how sharp the trend angle is, this bullish trend angle. Personally, I don't expect price to go below beyond the psychological level of 5900. Okay, but again, it's Trump administration, it's a trade deal week. If it happens, we could see massive volatility. Yeah, the only thing that can take out such technical analysis we know is sentiment analysis and strong fundamentals across board. So if the trade deal happens, some key comments from Trump administration come aboard, we could see a massive break beyond 5900 psychological level and perhaps to lower levels right here. So that's for support. On the resistance end of things, if price breaks above key psychological level 600, 0.6000 right there, we could see price touch 6025 and above that 6045, beyond that 6069, above that 6089, and perhaps the psychological level of 6100. Of course, um, because of again of how shipping the market is, I don't expect price to go so high up. Now, my take on the NZD USD, I am bearish in the short term. I'm looking for bearish signals in the short term. It looks bullish, but because of reversal patterns and the possibility of the US trade deal, US China trade deal, I favor bearish positions more on this guy. Next, the AUD USD. So, on a weekly chart, of course, we see that price seems to be reacting right there to a key other block level 6355, okay, from the spinning top right there. But then again, on the daily chart, we see it move nicely along an ascending channel. It has hit the resistance border of the ascending channel right there and seems to be targeting lower levels. Pay attention to these. On the 4-hour chart, however, we can spot some sort of divergence. So we see negative divergence connecting the lows from price. And if you connect the same lows on the RSI, some nice negative divergence right there. On the same 4-hour chart, if we're looking for key support or resistance levels, a break of key support level 6385 would see price touch 6362. If it goes below that, 6349, and if it goes below that, 6334. If price goes below that, then we could see it touch 6315 and perhaps 6300. And just like the Kiwi, just like the NZD USD, I do not expect it to go so far down because of how sharp this bullish trend angle is. But then again, as I said, Trump administration, US-China trade deal, crazy comments from from staff in his administration, all these would push it massively bearish, below levels expected, okay, from an analysis. So it could go all the way to 6300 psychological level and perhaps maybe even below that. So pay attention to this. On the flip side, if the reverse happens, maybe something like China refuses to strike a trade deal with the US. The US, of course, we know Trump. Trump could go crazy and then perhaps want to retaliate, do something emotional, increase the tariffs and all that. If that happens, a break of 6441, riding on that major event, could see price touch 64868 on the bullish end. If it goes above that, 6486, and above that, 6500 psychological level. And if it goes above that, 6522. That's for the Aussie. Now, let's look at the beautiful USD yen. Now, this guy has given us some nice profits back to back. We've analyzed that it was going to go strongly bearish for weeks on end. It's been going strongly bearish based on our equidistant channel we see here on the weekly chart. So we see an inner channel within a larger channel right here. Okay, an inner channel within a larger channel. Okay, and we know that we've been trading massive bearish signals all the way to the key support area here, and a break below that saw price touch key significant support level 140.40, okay, of the month of the month December 2023 and September 2024. Okay, price touched that, and we see very strong price rejection right there. Quickly jump back up and seems to be testing higher levels right here on the weekly chart. Okay, so we're out of the channel territory, indicating a bearish signal. However, because of this strong price rejection right here, I favor bullish positions more. So there's a good chance that price is trying to retest the support border of this channel. So pay attention to that. On the daily chart, we saw price hit massively on the bearish end, 140.00 psychological level. Very, very important psychological level right here. Not a nice price rejection in the form of a three inside up. 1, 2, 3 pattern you see here. Let's try to highlight that. We saw this, the three inside up pattern. Okay. And it touched the support border of the channel, went back up to the resistance border, and seems to be breaking past the resistance border right now. Now, for key entry levels, a break of key psychological level 144.00 could see price of 102, could see price touch 144.50. Above that, 144.79, and above that, 145.00 psychological level. If price goes beyond that, we could see it touch 145.50, and above that, 146.00, above that, 146.50. Okay. Again, trade deal possible. If it happens, to push the USD yen to the bullish end, the bullish side. Okay, pay attention to that. If it doesn't happen or an escalation occurs, you could see it drop to the bearish end. Now, in the short term, if it breaks below 143.24, we could see price touch key support level 142.86. At the break of key support level 142.86, I will consider bearish positions to perhaps 142.59, 142.29. Below that, 142.00 psychological level, and below that, 141.74, which would coincide with the resistance border of this descending channel. Ladies and gentlemen, you want to be very, very careful for this. So the one thing that could shift it to lower levels is the escalation of the trade wars. So pay attention to this. Now, the next pair I want us to look at is the Euro AUD. So let's look at the Euro AUD. Okay. The Euro AUD here, what's it telling us? First, we see the heads and shoulders pattern from the solid yellow circles visible right there. Head, left shoulder, right shoulder. Now, it formed key support level 1.7647. Now, if price breaks below that to 1.7601, we could see it touch 1.7548, below that 7500, below that 7464. If price breaks below that 7420, and below that 7368. Okay. On the flip side, if it goes beyond that level, goes above 1.7869, we could see it touch 1.7953, and above that 1.8010 or 8000 psychological level. Okay, pay attention to that. In general terms, I favor bearish positions on this guy because it seems to be trying to recover um, this fair value gap. But then again, because of the possibilities of a bearish drop on the AUD USD, there is a good chance we could have brief bullish run before the bearish run. So pay attention to that and wait for the break of the key support level there, 1.7647. Wait for a clear break of that before you consider lower levels. Now, the next consolation I want to look at is the GBP NZD. We analyzed this guy um, on our YouTube live and our Facebook live. Okay, we said a break of key level 2.2400. Okay, price breaking above that could see it touch 2.2509, above that 2.2600, and above that 2.2737. Beyond that 2.2900 psychological level. But if it happens to break below key support level 2.2218, we could see it touch 2.2105, below that 2.1936, below that 2.1824, below that 2.1682. Ladies and gentlemen, um, that's for GBP UNCD. Something to note on this guy, it's moving nicely along an ascending channel. Okay, it's touched the resistance border, looks to be targeting the lower levels right here. So because of this, just like the Euro AUD, I favor bearish positions over the bullish ones. I favor bearish positions over the bullish ones. Okay, that's that. Now, Bitcoin, the last but not the least, the almighty Bitcoin. What do we have on this guy? We have price break past P resistance level 9126. We predicted a nice bullish run last week, and we had that. We had a nice bullish run on Bitcoin. Very great stuff. Okay. Um, so my prediction is if it continues and goes beyond 9565, still looking strongly bullish. So if it goes above 9565, 659, I'm going on a buy based on Vestrado's platform to 97586, and if it goes above that 99262, I'm going to stop at 99262. Okay, and watch for reactions at psychological level $100,000. And on the flip side, if it goes below 91216, we could see price touch 88954. On Bitcoin, I'm bullish in the short term. Okay, waiting for possible reaction to key resistance level for perhaps bearish run. All right, that's that for our weekly outlook. Great to have you. I'll see you again next week. Have a good one. Remember, there are millions of traders in the world as there are thousands of strategies. No man is an island. No one strategy is king. The trend is your friend. Don't be overconfident and trade within the trend. Bye bye.